Well, good day and welcome once again to the Genius Path. I'm Steve Bonenberger. If you know us, and many, thank goodness, many people do now. Of course, we've been at this a very long time, and we're in the business of human improvement. That's my niche, if you will. Everything in my life surrounds human improvement, and the Genius Path is, of course, on human improvement. And for those of you that are interested in finding the Genius Path at thegeniuspath.com, you realize that it's only semester one that we have out. There'll be 4 semesters that I have crafted and curriculum that I have built on how do you improve a life and take a life from broken to something that is functional, and not only functional, but then thriving. Now, if you follow us, and like I said, thankfully many of you do, thousands of people across the world do now, you understand that we're always searching for people that are in the arena of human improvement. And we're going to be talking with Vincent Koehl in just a minute. And he's a very smart young man, and his world is dealing with maladaptive children. Now, before he gets going, I want you to know that I do a lot of work with maladaptive children. I would consider myself something of a subject matter expert on this matter and in this field of study, but I do not work with the population that he focuses on, and that's what brings him to our audience today. Vincent, good to see you on our program, kind sir.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's really neat to be able to connect with you. Now, at the beginning, let's talk a little bit about you and about your work. Now, when we were chatting in our pre-interview, you let me know that you deal with a really extreme kind of population. I think sometimes the populations that I deal with are extreme and live on the margins, but you're in a very specific field and with a very specific population. So let our audience know something about yourself, sir, and about the people that you serve, please.
Yeah, so my name is Vincent Koehl, like you mentioned, and I'm currently a master's student learning to go into seeking to go into marriage and family therapy, but at this point I'm working in the field of applied behavioral analysis, ABA for short, and working with children, especially those diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and doing one-on-one therapy with them, coasting through some programming to get them to be more functionally independent in the world. So that ranges from some of the children are going to have behavioral issues. So some of them are going to be very aggressive in terms of asking them to do something. They're going to reach out, grab you, try to bite you. So be it. Each child with autism is different. So each kid has an individualized plan that we work through. And a part of me going into marriage and family therapy, seeing the way that these kids are interact and the way that what I'm doing in this field, seeing how that is just affecting them, that also has to affect the relationships they have with people. So I do want to work with children and adolescents, especially those with behavioral issues and behavioral concerns, and then work with their families of how can we work together with that, because it's not just the behavior that are affecting them, it's affecting the relationships that they're having and how their parents are going to react to other things as well. So hoping to work in that, but particularly in the field of ABA, it's looking at behavioral issues and being like, what are the motivations behind these behavioral issues? Why do they do these things that they're doing, and how can we show an alternative to that? So rather than aggressing, if you're looking for something or seeking a toy, what I can do is then say, okay, if you tap me on the arm instead of grab my arm, you can get my attention, and then I can ask you and you can communicate with me in that way. And some of the children I work with are nonverbal. So it's difficult to know when they're aggressing what they're seeking, because they can't tell me at that point. So what we work on in that is we have communication devices. So we're also teaching them how to use communication devices. Some of them, it's going to be sign language, but you can only teach a child sign language, having to teach them what that means and what they're going to get with that. So some of them are just an actual iPad device sort of thing, where you tap something that says hummus, and it will say hummus out loud, so that they know that they're going to get that particular food. Or I want to go to the gym, so they can say gym and get to the gym in that capacity.
If
So
you
working.
if you could, Vincent, talk to the parents. I'm curious about how parents. It's just got to be such an enormous. I don't want to use the word burden because that's the wrong word, but it's got to be such an enormous challenge every day for parents to face and stare this down. And there's a sense of interminable here because
Mhm.
this isn't like something that's going to have a, there's not a cure at the end of some treatment rainbow. Perhaps you see mild improvement, these kind of things. But if you're a parent and you sense your kid is either on the spectrum or has been on the spectrum and so properly diagnosed, what do you notice that parents say to you? And what would you say to parents with their children that they're noticing these aberrant forms of behavior at early ages?
I think one of the parents that I talk to on occasion, because after we give the treatment, we share with the parents how their day was. Sort of like if they were going to school, you would tell them how they did in school. But he always says, he goes, it's just a day, it's just another day in the life of a child with special needs. He goes, that's just part of what it is. You don't know what's going to happen. The unique challenges of doing that. He's like, we're going to spend money on more clothes because he's going through clothes as opposed to spending it on toys for him or video games or something because he can't play that. So it's just a different sort of format of what is actually motivating to him, that trying to get him some shoes that look more in tune to the style of a teenager than the style of Velcro shoes and the style of like a 6-year-old. So he's like, it's all about working with what is he seeking and how can we overcome that? And I think sometimes the parents I have seen parents reluctant and about, well, my kid does not have special needs. I'm not going to get them tested for this. And it's like, it's for their betterment if they get this treatment, if they get treatment plan. Now, it's
I
not
guess
saying.
what I'm wondering about is, and I'm trying to try to whittle this down or to focus a little bit.
Mhm.
I wonder how parents are receiving the work. That's what I really want to know.
Oh, yeah.
If you're a parent and you have this child, I know what happens on my side of the fence. But if you're a parent and you have this child with this very specific diagnosed medical disorder, how generally do they receive that and how do they function within that? That's my question. And I'm sorry I didn't make it specific enough.
No. Yeah, I think the parents generally are pretty receptive of it. At least if they're sending them to this type of therapy, they I think are finding it useful. And most of the time, this therapy it uses insurance, so the insurance gets billed for it and everything. So that's a component of it. But it's also teaching the parents that it's like, if we find strategies that work, that it's we tried to use this when this kid did this, maybe you could try that at home. And then that way the home behavior is resembling of what they're doing in the clinic or the classroom sort of setting that we have here, that it's like, this will help generalize that skill. So it's actually more functional in the daily life, because generally they're going to have some issues. And when they come to us and they're like, okay, these are the things we're seeing at home, how can we reduce these? And then it's like, okay, we're going to work with you through that, but you're also going to have to work on some of the things that we're attempting and we're probing and we're getting through in this capacity. So I think at the point that they get to where sending their kids to the ABA and ABA therapy, I think they're pretty receptive of what's going on, and they're pretty acknowledging of this is a concern, and this is helping reduce the behaviors that we're seeing or we're hoping to reduce. And I think
that's helpful. I want to get now into your podcast because I want you to talk a little bit about what fires up your engine, and what you told me is you've got a podcast called Love Hints by Prince Vince. And
yes.
you told me it's available on Spotify and Apple and Stitcher and Google Podcast, a lot of places. So, folks, if you're out in the marketplace and you're searching for something to listen to, other than us, I might say, go to Love Hints by Prince Vince and give us just a snapshot. What do you build? What are the interesting ideas that you're working on there, Vincent?
Yeah, so the mission and vision is sharing love one hint at a time. So I was always told as a kid that I had a lot of good one-liners that people are like, if I could just write that one-liner down, it comes back to you. And I think there's a lot of love cliches out there that we have that you say often. You're like, okay, what does that actually mean? And what does that entail? And is this truthful enough? And it actually started about 3.5 years ago. I was in a little rough place of just looking for goodness and beauty and truth in the world, and I couldn't find it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to look everywhere for goodness, truth, and beauty. And I found it in just sources of love, like seeing someone sharing love to another person. It draws you in. It's so attractive because it's so genuine and true and authentic, at least the true forms of love. Because a lot of people will say, oh, I love you, or I love this thing, and I love that thing. And it's like, okay, but how true of a component of love is that? But when you get down to the goodness and the authenticity of love, it's kind of hard to push that aside. So I came about this and helped a lot of people with relationship advice. I mean, teenagers, high schoolers, college age students, a lot of relational components coming together, and hanging out with this person, hanging out with that person. But I think I like them both, but I can't do that, and society tells me otherwise. But it's like, okay, when we step down to the truth behind it, where can we go and what can we do today to actually spread that love and actually show somebody? And I came to realize that when I look for goodness in the world, you can see it. And when you look for love in the world, you can see it. It's that almost optimistic mindset to it. And that led me to the point that I'm like, okay, how can I share this? And then knowing that at the end of my life, all that really matters is how many people I show love to. All that really matters is like, if I was able to represent and show somebody that I cared for them. It doesn't matter anything else. That's the real component that
That's
people aren't.
Pretty interesting. I like what you're saying. It's my belief that altruism, compassion, lots of words for that, are one of the true human characteristics, that and reason, and the ability to communicate, with words and high concepts. So, if you're going to define love, if in the truest, most pure form of the word, how do you define the word love?
So I think, okay, I'm going to go with I've always learned that love is like a true gift of self, and that's the way I've learned to say it. But I think that takes sort of something away from it, because it's like, okay, that's a great idea, but how is that practical? So I think that love is being responsible for another person before they even recognize they need to be responsible for that. That it's like, I'm going out of my way to not take over your life and not push you towards a certain direction. But the fact that what happens in your life, I'm taking almost as if it's my burden. It's my burden too. That what you're doing and your cares and your passions that you have, I'm going to give to that as well. That it's not like, okay, give me your heart and I'm going to hold on to it. But it's like, here, I'm going to give you part of my heart too, because when your heart stops holding or your heart's hurting, I have that component that can keep you going and keep you pressuring forward. So a total gift of self, I'm like, I think that's a perfect description of it. But I don't think the practicality of what love is, you can see it. And I think that's another component of why I produce this podcast, is it's like, how can you take these truths and make it practical so people can actually do something in the daily to overcome that and actually show it to other people.
Well, I'm so glad you showed up on our show, and hopefully you'll come back another day. His name is Vincent Koehl, and he has a podcast called Love Hints by Prince Vince. Go find it. And if you pay attention to us, and thankfully many of you, lots and lots of people do, you know that for us, what he just talked about is what we call acts of service. That's how the Genius Path defines the words that he just gave. And I think it's pretty parallel. Well, Vincent, I'm glad you showed up. I hope and pray good things for you. And now to our audience, I remind you that if you want to find out about us and you want to get your free copy of the Eightfold Genius Path, go to thegeniuspath.com, thegeniuspath.com, and register, and you'll get that free first real piece of information from us. Till next time, I'm Steve Bonenberger, and this is The Genius Path. Travel far.